So here's the truth no one wants to admit. I was the one fucking up my relationship. Not my need to work on myself or the lie that I tell myself or we tell ourselves that we're just not putting enough focus on ourselves. No, it was me. Oh, we need to break up because I need to focus on me right now, right? No, I was the emotional chaos, the reason, the drama queen, the master of the swear I'll change this time speech, served with a side of tears and just enough sincerity to buy me forgiveness again and again. And guess what? I did mean every word, right? Until the very next meltdown. You know what I'm talking about, okay? This episode isn't about how he betrayed me or how they let me down or he let me down. This is about how I broke the trust over and over and how I finally dragged myself out of this victim mode that we put ourselves in, wrote an actual emotional contract, and sat across from the man I love to read it to him out loud. Not to beg, not to manipulate, but to prove to myself that I wasn't going to play anymore. I wanted to make the change. So if you've ever been the one saying, I'll do better, and secretly hoping that would be enough, and wondering why it's not enough, this one's for you. Because we are talking ownership, accountability, and what it actually looks like to earn back trust. One uncomfortable, ego-shattering moment at a time. So if you're ready, let's get real, let's get raw, and let's go!
Welcome to the carnival, I'm the ringleader now. Won't hear a sound at all as I bury you 6 feet underground.
All right, so I was the one making these empty promises, right? I was the emotional roller coaster, essentially. So many times I put my boyfriend Justin through a cycle of drama and apologies that could give you whiplash. It's like, oh yes, one day you're like, I'm sweet, I'm loving. The next, I'd spiral into an emotional outburst, then sob and swear I'll change, I promise, and get defensive and say that I'm triggered. But here's the spoiler, right? I didn't change. Oh, not then. No, I was stuck on a merry-go-round of reactive emotions and broken promises, and it was all my doing. I know we love to play that victim card, right? We love to sit there and say, oh my God, he did this and he did this, and you get so defensive, and he triggered me and he brought up my past and he told me I was this and that, right? And we get to play in that victim mode, right? Think about it. In the heat of an argument or a meltdown, when you're saying, I'll change, I'm sorry, right? It always felt like the easy way out. It was a quick fix, a Band-Aid slapped over a crack in a dam, right? My reactions used to be volatile and impulsive as fuck. I'd yell, maybe throw out a low blow or two. Or 3, or 10. Storm off, then come back tearfully apologizing and saying that I was just hurt and bringing something from my past, right? Because then we get to play the victim. I did truly mean it when I said that I was sorry and I promised to do better. But once the storm had passed, I would get comfortable again. I would say that I'm going to journal, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But then I'd go right back to these old habits. Why? Because saying I'd change was easy. It still is, right? Actually changing is the hard as hell truth. Now, looking back, I realized I was addicted to this cycle. I'd blow up when triggered, then feel guilty and promise to improve without having any real plan or tools to do so. I was behaving a bit like a passive-aggressive promise breaker, agreeing in the moment to do anything just to end the fucking conflict and essentially win, right? But not following through when it counted. Honestly, I was selfish as fuck. Every time I broke a promise to Justin, I eroded a little more of his trust at me, right? At the time, I didn't fully get that. I figured if he saw I felt bad, that was enough because he's a good mind reader, right? In reality, every agreement I failed to honor was creating hurt, anger, and mistrust in him. I was writing emotional checks my actions couldn't cash. You see what I did there? Why was I'll change my ego's go-to? Because it bought me time and forgiveness without immediately doing the work. It was a magic phrase that diffused the tension in the moment. Here's what was really going on inside of me. I was avoiding true change. Admitting I needed to fundamentally change was scary. It's way easier to say the words than to dig into my deep-rooted habits. You know what I'm talking about because I'm sure that we all do it. It's human nature. We promise. And then what? Nothing, right? I wanted a quick reset. Promising to change would calm things down fast. It gave both of us hope and swept the mess under the rug until the next time. Yes, there was always a next time. And if you say there wasn't, you're a liar. I lacked the tools. Frankly, I didn't know how to regulate my emotions, period, right? I had no strategy, so I kept falling back into the same reactions. Even if I wanted to behave differently, it was like I was physically and mentally, emotionally incapable of behaving differently because I was saying the words without backing any of it up, which is exactly what we do. It's fearing the discomfort, doing the real work, self-reflection, changing your routines, those things that are uncomfortable, actually admitting that you're wrong. You know you hate doing it, right? Saying sorry was uncomfortable, but it's far less painful than sustained change. We can say we're sorry, right? But it's not actually changing anything. It's literally saying that you're sorry that hurt them, but you're going to do it again because you're telling your brain, this is just who you are. I'll apologize and it'll be fine, right? So round and around, we went on this emotional roller coaster that I was operating. I convinced myself this apology would be the last, that I really would change starting now, but without concrete action, those words were empty, and you know they were empty. And with each empty promise, Justin's patience was wearing thinner and thinner as well. Eventually, Justin wasn't buying it anymore, okay? And this was my wake-up call. It came on a night that seared into my memory because he told me he just couldn't do it anymore. We had a huge blow-up over something trivial as per the usual, or a miscommunication as per the usual. I went through my normal script. Tears in my eyes, voice trembling. I know I messed up. I'm sorry. I promise I'll change. I swear this time will be different. But here's the reality, ladies. Instead of this cautious optimism or tentative forgiveness that I was used to seeing, that face where he said, okay, all right, babe, I understand. I saw something new. There was this emptiness. He just looked at me, quiet and tired, and said, I don't think I can do this anymore. I don't think I want this anymore. It hit me like a punch in the gut. Not only did he say it, I saw it in his face. He didn't yell. He didn't leave. He just didn't want it. Because can you blame him? He didn't believe me. Why would he? At that moment, I realized I had broken this man's trust so many times that my promises meant nothing. He said, you broke my heart. And I realized, fuck, I broke his heart. You can't just like quick fix that one, Angela. Good fucking going, right? It's like, what can I possibly do, right? All the goodwill and benefit of the doubt I used to count on was evaporating before my eyes. As Psychology Today puts it, when disappointing behavior happens repeatedly, even a loving partner's goodwill starts to diminish and the excuses simply become no longer believable. That's exactly where we were at. My apologies had become a bad fucking joke. Justin didn't get angry. He got indifferent. He got emotionally distant, which somehow it feels way fucking worse. I remember standing there, my stomach twisting, thinking, this is different. This is serious. This is it. I might actually lose him if I don't get my fucking shit together. It was like staring at the wreckage I'd created and finally understanding I was the one that drove us here. In that silence, I felt the weight of every broken promise I'd made. Justin's forgiveness was no longer on autopilot, and I knew I couldn't blame him. Trust isn't a given. It has to be earned continually. And I had done zilch to fucking earn it lately. That was the moment something shifted in me. I'm sitting there saying, no, babe, but you know I'm good for it. You know, when you borrow money from somebody too many times and you say you're going to give it back, you still haven't given them back. You're like, you know I'm good for it. Do they though? Do they? No. Nobody knows you're good for it because you don't even know you're good for it at that point. You're like, just trust me. Stop it. Just stop it, right? I realized that those words were actually worthless. The usual, I'm really sorry, I'll do better. You know what I'm talking about. It wasn't going to cut it. If I kept these patterns up that I was repeating over and over, I was going to destroy this relationship for good. And I actually sat there and said, did I destroy this relationship for good? Many relationships don't survive these repeated breaches of trust, and we were teetering on that edge. I could feel that deep in my bones. I had two choices, okay? I could actually change, or I could let this relationship implode. Now, when you think about it, you're like, well, I mean, you should just cut ties for the relationship, right? Or maybe you're like, oh yeah, well, let's just change then. But saying it and actually realizing that your relationship may not even survive no matter what you fucking do, that realization hits you so fucking hard. So hard, right? So obviously I was like, well, if I want this, I've got to at least try. I've got to at least show him. I can't just say these words. And I told myself, what the fuck am I going to do? I chose. I'm going to change, right? But saying that and doing it, they're two different things, as my track record has proven. I knew I had to prove it now, not just promise it. So I did something I never did before. I sat down and I emotionally jumped on ChatGPT. And I said, look, let's have a therapy session. And I told all my shit. I said all the things I was doing, all the things that I kept promising. And the response was, okay, babe, first of all, take a deep breath because that was a lot. I was like, who the fuck? Listen, ChatGPT, I need you to chill the fuck out. But it talked to me and gave me a couple ideas. So one clicked, and then I started evolving that idea into something that I've never done before. I sat down for the first time in 37 years, and I wrote an emotional contract with myself in the form of a letter to Justin. I literally put pen to paper, well, fingers to keyboard because my hands cramp up. And I titled it, My promise to Justin. Now, let me tell you, writing that letter was one of the most uncomfortable and vulnerable things I have literally ever done. The moment, that very minute that I opened the blank document, a wave of shame washed over me as I'm writing these words. I had to confront in black and white all the times I'd let him down. Part of me really didn't want to face that. Shame thrives on secrecy and avoidance, and I'd been avoiding true accountability for a long ass time. Now, here I was forcing myself to put it all out there. Every time I typed a sentence owning up to a behavior, a little voice of resistance was piping up. Do we have to spell it out? Isn't it enough that I feel bad? Don't you think this is overkill? This is stupid. My ego, let me tell you, my ego hated the entire process. But I kept going because another voice, I call it my better half, my better self, right? It finally was waking up. It said that if you spell it out, if you don't, rather, spell it out, you're going to lose him. This is you taking ownership. Do it. It was so hard. I'm literally shaking while I'm writing it. I am crying my eyes out while I'm taking ownership of these things, getting specific. So I was like, okay, if I'm crying, then this really does need to happen. So I pushed through the discomfort. I wrote and rewrote, trying to be as brutally honest and not justify my bad behavior with any buts or blame shifting. I focused on promises I could keep, not lofty, vague claims, okay? I was effectively drawing up a contract with myself to finally back up my words with consistent action. Now, I later learned that accountability really does start with the promises you make to yourself. And here I was doing exactly that on paper. Now, I want to share a few excerpts from my promise to Justin, okay, the letter that became my personal accountability contract. These are some of the lines, warning, it's a little raw and not at all sugar-coated, okay? Take a breath. Dear Justin, I'm writing this because I know my words have become meaningless to you, and I don't blame you. I've said I'll change more times than I can count, and I've broken that promise every time. I was the one who kept shattering your trust, and I am so deeply sorry for that. No more excuses. I'm done being a victim to my own emotions. From now on, I take full responsibility for my actions, my words, and my reactions. You deserve consistency, not an apology parade. I promise you are going to see change in my actions, not just hear it in my words. And then I said, I will work on myself every single day. When I get triggered or upset, I will not dump it all on you or lash out. I will pause, breathe, and remember this promise. I will communicate calmly instead of exploding. If I feel overwhelmed, I'll tell you I need a moment rather than saying something hurtful. I am committed to breaking the reactive cycle that I've been stuck in. And then I went on to say, I know this letter doesn't fix everything. Trust has to be rebuilt over time, but I am prepared to earn it. I won't ask you to trust me on this letter. I'm going to show you. I'll prove it one day, one step at a time, because I love you and because you deserve the best version of me. This is my promise to you and to myself, that I will change and keep changing for the better. Now, those are just a few snippets, okay? Obviously, there was a lot more. It was a few pages. But you get the idea, okay? Writing these promises down made them feel very real. It was no longer a fleeting, yeah, I'll do better, set in the haze of an emotional aftermath. It was documented commitment. And seeing it there in writing also made me reckon with what I'd done. I cried a million times. I almost teared up right now reading it. I cried a lot writing it. Tears of regret, a bit of hope that made it wasn't easy too late. Maybe it wasn't too late. By the end, I had a 2-page letter that basically said, here's what I did. Here's what I'm going to do differently. And I'm owning all of it. It was my heartfelt contract to Justin, but also to myself. Now, the whole thing was not 2 pages. It was about 8 pages. But the letter that I actually wrote was 2 pages. Writing it was tough, but reading it out loud to him, I felt like I was standing naked in front of an audience. I invited Justin to sit with me on his business chair, and I said, sit down. And I stood in front of him, and he was like, you don't have to do this. And I was like, first of all, you don't know what I'm doing, so I need you to just sit still, look pretty, baby. But I told him, I need to do this, and I need to take this very seriously, and I need to read this to you because I need you to understand how sorry I am. Okay. So I was shaking. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. This was make or break in my mind. Now, I remember that I was opening with something like, I know my words don't mean much right now, but I wrote them down because I need you to hear this. Now, when I said that, my voice was trembling as I began to read this letter. Now, sentence by sentence got harder and harder. I laid everything out. The confession of how I'd been the one hurting him. The explicit promises of what I would do to change. How I was going to take those steps. The acknowledgement that I knew trust would only be rebuilt by consistent action. I took accountability for it. Saying those words to his face, so terrifying, trembling, crying. I couldn't even read because I was crying so hard. My throat was dry. A part of me expected him to interrupt and say, just spare me, just stop. I don't even, like, you're wasting your time. That's literally what I thought was going to happen. But honestly, that is why we are afraid to do that, right? Because that fear of rejection. And get this, he didn't. He sat there and listened quietly. I had no idea what was on his mind, but I knew for my own sake of wanting to do things differently and telling myself, if it's not working, you need to change it. Right? He listened quietly. He was staring at me the whole time. I could see the emotions in his face. You could see this mix of hurt, cautious hope, or what I hoped was cautious hope. I had no idea what he was thinking. He stayed. He sat in silence till I finished. Reading it aloud was like ripping off a bandage I'd been layering for years. It hurt to speak each promise because I knew I actually had to follow through or I'd break both his heart and my own heart because I keep promising to change and I keep promising for peace. I also felt exposed, admitting all my faults so plainly. At one point, I had to stop because I was crying again and again. And I was crying to the point where I literally couldn't see through my tears, and I was wiping, and then I had mascara, and so I was getting my mascara all over me. It was ridiculous, but I pushed. My voice was cracking like, and I got to the end of the letter. Oh, literally just ugly girl crying. Just that's what I look like. I'm not joking. I looked like my favorite toy was taken and I was 5 years old. Now, the last thing I said was, this is my promise. I mean every word, and I'm going to prove it to you. Then I looked up at him, drained and afraid to breathe. Now, honestly, what happened next was, I was gonna say it's not like a Hollywood moment, but it really was, right? He didn't jump up and sweep me into a hug or instantly forgive everything, but it felt like a Hollywood moment because there was so much emotion. You could feel it in the air. He was quiet for what seemed like forever, and then he thanked me. And he admitted that he did need to see it and that he could feel the difference. And he said it was so sweet that I was actually doing that and I was promising these things. And I told him that I really hoped that he could believe me, but I wasn't expecting him to believe me because I knew I had to do that. That is true ownership. Not saying that he needs to listen and that I'm doing this for him, but telling him that I need to do this because I promised myself that I was going to do things right this time, right? Seeing it and hearing it was like a game changer, honestly, right? We both cried and we just held each other. He took the letter from my hands and I told him that was my contract to him, so he had to keep it. That was it. We held each other for like the longest time. It was simple, but it was powerful in its own quiet way. In that moment, I felt a strange mix of fear and empowerment. Like fear because now the safety net of empty promises was truly gone, right? If I messed up again without effort, I knew I'd probably lose him. But that empowerment was also there because for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't hiding from my behavior or making excuses or playing the victim. I was laying it all out and I survived. I fucking survived. It actually felt like a weight off my chest to finally take ownership so completely. By speaking my commitment out loud, I had, in a sense, officially signed that emotional contract. I was holding myself accountable in front of the person that I owed such accountability to. And you know what? There was power in that vulnerability. I felt this complete shift inside of me. It was no longer just about not upsetting Justin. It was about me not betraying my own values. Reading that letter aloud was like drawing a line in the sand. This is the old me on one side. This is the new me, stepping hesitantly over to the other. It was the first real step of many to come. This is not some easy shit. This is you taking ownership of your part. That letter and the act of reading it weren't a magic cure, but they set the stage for real transformation. So after that day, I knew I couldn't ever go back to the way things were. I pinned a copy of the letter on my desk, okay? It's a daily reminder. Then I actually got to work with it, right? So I was living that contract. And what changed? Everything. I set my phone on an alarm five to six times per day, every single day, to give me self check-ins where I can sit there and I can either read part of that contract or just lay down and just stare up. 5 minutes. That's it. That's it. Just taking time for myself to regroup and reset and remind myself that I am no longer this victim, that I do have the control, and that control starts with taking that same ownership each and every day. All right. So this was not immediate. I didn't turn into some like perfect Zen partner overnight. Okay. It was far from it. But my mindset had fundamentally shifted from making these empty promises that I had learned from my own toxic relationships from the past to taking that ownership and actually wielding it like a sword. So here are the key shifts that I began to embody. Okay. I stopped saying I'll change without action. If I messed up, I owned it fully without deflecting blame or making excuses. Every promise I made, I treated like rock solid law. No more casual, yeah, I'll do better. If I said it, I backed it. I made sure my apologies came with changed behavior, not just words, because an apology without change is just manipulation, as the saying goes. Over time, Justin saw that I meant what I wrote. It took time and a lot of my energy to just release all of that from my body and take the ownership as it was. For example, if I promised in the letter to practice patience, I actively practiced it during our conflicts by listening and breathing before responding or reacting. Each kept promise was, even if it was small, it was a brick in rebuilding this trust. Okay. Now, I had always been highly reactive, flying off the handle at little things. But now I was focusing more on regulating those knee-jerk reactions. Now, remember how I promised to pause when triggered? Well, I started actually doing that. I would literally excuse myself to the bathroom to take 10 deep breaths when I felt that familiar anger surge, or I'd go on the steps and I'd just sit there and just cry until I felt like I had more control. I started journaling and meditating in the mornings to get a handle on my stress. It wasn't easy work. I still have to sit there and get creative with how I'm going to process things where I feel like I'm being attacked, and then reminding myself that I'm actually safe. Okay. You're rewiring the habits. And if you don't know what I'm talking about with this rewiring, then go through my series. I have a 5-part series on rewiring your brain. Okay. But it is hard, but possible. Emotional reactivity is like being in fight or flight mode, where you let your emotions take control. And that was me to a T. So I worked on staying with uncomfortable feelings without immediately exploding or dumping them on Justin. If something he said upset me, I practiced active listening instead of shouting back, which, by the way, not easy. And sometimes there is a little shout here and there, okay? But I learned to say, I feel hurt. I need a moment. You're hurting my feelings, which is not easy for me to say. And instead, I would always act out. But these were small changes, but with consistently doing them, I started to break that old cycle, and I'm still working on that. I'm learning the art of calming myself and responding instead of impulsively reacting. That is emotional regulation and practice. It's a game changer for someone like me who is always a slave to my triggers and to my defensive ego and to all the trauma and all the land, okay? I went from victimhood to leader of my life. Now, this one is more of an internal psychological shift, okay? I used to have this like victim mentality about my own emotions, okay, to go deeper. Like, I can't help it. I'm just like this because of my anxiety or my stress or whatever, right? I would blame my outbursts on everything from my past to my hormones, which was really a way to avoid taking responsibility. So after the letter, I consciously had to ditch the victim act like I was talking about. But to do that, I had to step up and become my emotional leader with my behaviors as well. Instead of saying I can't control it, I had to start consciously telling myself I am in control of how I respond. This mentality is so fucking crucial. It is the hardest thing you could ever do, okay? But essentially what you have to do is you have to stop viewing your emotional roller coaster as something that happened to you and seeing it as something that I was driving myself. Nobody else was driving it. I was allowing their actions to swerve my driving patterns. Now, overcoming that victim mindset meant acknowledging my own power and agency. I had to stop feeling powerless, start seeing every reaction as a choice that I could manage. Now, psychologists often say that overcoming victimhood requires recognizing personal agency and taking responsibility for one's actions. Yeah, I had to do exactly that. No more poor me, I messed up again. I had to replace that with I chose that reaction and I can choose differently. This shift from victim to owner of my life made me feel stronger and more capable. It also made me feel calmer. I was no longer at the mercy of my emotions. I was learning to guide my emotions. And I know that's really hard to hear, but it is the truth. All of these shifts together meant that day by day, I was showing up differently in my relationship. And guess what? He did notice, and he does still notice. Slowly but surely, he has started to soften again. He didn't praise me every time he saw a little change, nor was I looking for those gold stars. But I could tell he felt cautiously optimistic. More importantly, I noticed a difference in how I felt about myself. I started gaining self-respect because I was keeping my word to him and to me. Each time I stayed calm in a situation that previously would have set me off, I'd internally high-five myself like, look at you doing that thing. Good job, girl, right? It built momentum. Now, building trust is a slow process. I knew that just writing a letter wasn't enough. It was the consistent follow-through that would heal us. I stayed mindful that trust is rebuilt through small, consistent actions over time. Not one grand apology. We so often do that. We think that we can make this grand gesture and everything's fine. Whenever old habits creep up, you have to revisit the contract that you make. Even reading it a few times reminds me, okay, little by little, promise by promise, I start feeling the repairing because I'm tearing down those limiting beliefs and those ideas of victimhood and those preconceived notions, right? But that is where the change is possible. And this is where I turn it to you, okay? Now, I didn't share this long personal story just for fun, okay? This wasn't like, oh yeah, this is a good time, right? I'm sharing it because I know there are others out there riding a similar roller coaster. Maybe you recognize a bit of yourself in my mess. If you're cringing because you've been dishing out your own empty promises or cycling through reactive drama, This is your wake-up call, my friend. It's time. It is time to get off the ride. Let me ask you point blank. This is your savage best friend, okay? Are you stuck in a cycle of emotional reactions followed by hollow apologies? Just be honest. Don't lie to yourself. Do you find yourself constantly saying, I'll change, or I'm sorry, just to smooth things over without actually addressing the root issue? Not just in romantic, but in every relationship of your life. If you are answering yes to any of them, then it's time to face that pattern head on. Are you blaming circumstances or your personality for your outburst? I was just in a bad mood. I can't help it. I'm just sensitive. Those might be true factors, but they're not an excuse to avoid doing the work. Catch yourself if you're playing the victim of your own life. Just be honest. Do you keep breaking someone's trust or your own and assuming things will somehow be fine? Hear this. Each broken promise chips away at your relationships. How long until there's nothing left? It is on you to stop that leak. Do you need to rewrite your own contract or write for the first time? This is a literal suggestion. If you are struggling with consistent change, try what I did. Get uncomfortable. Write a no BS letter to the person you've been disappointing or to yourself, outlining exactly how you will back up your words from now on. There's something incredibly clarifying about seeing your commitment in writing. Okay, I can even send you a blank copy so that you can fill in the blanks and do it yourself. It's my little cheat sheet, as it were, that I give to my members. These questions aren't easy. I know it's much easier to say, yeah, I'll do better next time and move on. But real growth lives in the uncomfortable places. For me, that meant admitting I was the problem and doing the hardest thing I've ever done emotionally, humbling myself, making a plan, and sticking to it. It meant trading short-term comfort, avoiding the issue, for long-term healing. Now, if you're resonating with this, I challenge you to take a step toward your real change. Maybe it's writing that letter or having that brutally honest conversation. Maybe it's seeking therapy or learning about emotional regulation techniques or listening to other podcasts or whatever the fuck you think, right? Maybe it's as simple as, or as hard as, committing to pause for 1 minute when you get triggered. That one is a doozy, right? Or stopping yourself. Instead of reacting immediately, stopping and saying, you're right. Dun, dun, dun. You know, that one's hard, right? Whatever it is, make it concrete. Don't just promise it. Do it. I'm not going to lie to you. This journey is tough. I still falter consistently, but I can tell you, hand on heart, it's worth it. My relationship with Justin is slowly healing. More importantly, my relationship with myself has done a complete 180. I am no longer ashamed when I look in the mirror because I see a woman who owns her shit truly and is actively working on it, not just for my significant other, but also for my children. That is such a good feeling. Ask yourself, are you ready to step off the emotional roller coaster you've been on? Are you ready to stop BSing yourself and the people you love? It might require you to do something uncomfortable today that your future self will thank you for later, right? It might require swallowing your pride and actually following through on your word repeatedly. It might even require writing your own emotional contract and reading out loud. Like we said, right? I know that's scary. It's terrifying. I'll tell you what, my members, they were like, I don't even know what the fuck. Let me tell you. Let me see. They're trying to look at my like compare notes, like, what did you write? Let me see that, right? It's scary. But if your story is anything like mine, taking that leap could be the difference between staying stuck in your emotional chaos and finally growing into the person that you have been saying you are going to become. No more empty promises, okay? No matter what step you take, stop making empty promises to yourself. It is time to back your words with action. One moment, one day at a time. I'm doing it one triggered moment and one uncomfortable promise at a time, and I am rooting for you to do the same. Your future self, your partners, your friends, everyone you care about, including you, will be better off when you step up and lead your life out of the chaos. You've got this. Now, go write your own damn letter if you need to, and then live by it. Your life will thank you for it later. Trust me. I know. I'll see you next time. Bye, babe.